Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Sheila Wybrow. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Tahoma UU congregation. As we begin our gathering, I respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from occupied ancestral lands. I pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people. We welcome all who are joining us with a longing for community, the hope for peace, and who are seeking justice. We are a diverse congregation which encourages each one who comes through our doors to find their own truth and belief. We invite all to join us in a search for meaning and community guided by reason, respect for each other, and by love. While we continue to meet online due to the surge of COVID cases from the Delta variant, we are glad to have this virtual platform. In addition to welcoming our folks local to Tacoma, we also welcome guests from outside our traditional geographic area. You can find all of our program announcements this week in our e-news and listed on the church calendar. Here are some highlights. Today, following the worship service, we have 3 opportunities to connect in community. First, immediately following our worship service, you can join us for social time in Zoom meeting. The link will be pasted at the end of the worship service, or you can find it via the church calendar. Second, at noon, join us for a social time in person at Wapato Park at noon. Reverend Joe Rettmeyer, Tahoma UU's sabbatical minister, will be joining our social time at Wapato Park each Sunday at noon. Please feel free to join us in these outdoor gatherings each Sunday for fellowship, fun, connection, and enlightening conversations. And you'll find us close to the children's play structure off the Sheridan exit. At this time, these are our safest ways for our congregation to gather together, including children who don't yet have vaccination options. And our third gathering today will be at Charlotte's Blueberry Park at 1 p.m. for blueberry picking. This is a great, free, and delicious activity for all ages. This week, our TUUC Free Thinking Mystics with Doug Taylor will begin meeting at a new time of 6:30 on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday evenings. Links to the materials that will be used for the discussions can be found in the e-news or at the event link on the church calendar. On Thursday evening, join Cindy Hackett for a ramble at Dune Peninsula at Port Defiance Park. Next Sunday's worship service is our annual water service with Joe Rettmeyer, Reverend Joe, and the Infinite Cups Pagan Group. The worship service will be online via Zoom and Facebook. At noon following the worship service, the Infinite Cups will be offering a physical opportunity in our church parking lot to commingle waters. Say, do you like to clean? Of course you do. Everybody likes to clean. So we have a volunteer opportunity to come to the church and do a shift cleaning the downstairs classrooms. If you are interested, please email board.tahomauu.congregation. That's board.tahomauu.congregation. Links for all our programs will be found in the weekly e-news on our calendar. Please read when it arrives in your inbox. It's the primary channel for you to stay connected and informed on all that is happening. Our staff works very hard to assure all the e-news contains news and information that you ask for and expect. If you are submitting to e-news, you must do it by Tuesday, 9 p.m. or I won't make it. Thank you. As always, thank you for your ongoing financial support to our congregation that makes all things possible. These programs, our staff who create and facilitate the programs, and the connections we make through our congregation. And now let us prepare to gather in worship.
Good morning, beloveds. A few of us are here at home in our sanctuary, me and John Hargis and his daughter Rose helping with technical things in the booth, and it is so good to be in this space, even though we are still virtual. Listening to the announcements just now, there is no shortage of life happening here at Tahoma UU. Plenty of opportunities to join in, to lend a hand, and to gather together. So with these opening words, let us come together. Let Astonishment Be Possible by Reverend Gretchen Haley. Whatever you have come in anticipating, whatever you expect or worry for our world, for the future, for our lives, let it go. Make space in your heart to be surprised. Make room in your soul for a new story to take shape. Let astonishment be possible at this life that remains a miracle. Imagine here the bursting of joy, relentless and resilient, coming in waves, washing over us with music and story and silence. And still, this dreaming together, being hope for each other and courage to believe in this new day dawning. For us all, come, let us worship together.
Let us say our chalice lighting words now that Joe has lit our chalice. We have lit this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. Good morning and happy Labor Day. My name is Nancy Slocum, and I am the Director of Religious Education or Exploration, for children and youth here at Tahoma Unitarian Universalist Congregation. As I mentioned before, it is so good to be together. This is our time for all ages, a time when young people and the young at heart gather together for a story. I started out by wishing you a happy Labor Day. Tomorrow is Labor Day in our country. Do you have any plans to celebrate the day? Labor Day is always held on the first Monday in September, and for many, it marks the end of summer. If you're back in school and you have the day off, you may have the day off, you will have the day off. If you're not back at school, it's probably because the school district decided to wait until after Labor Day to start the school year. The adults in your life may have the day off. People often have barbecues or picnics. Some towns have parades for Labor Day, and people generally enjoy having a day off from work and school. But what's Labor Day all about? One of the meanings of the word labor is simply work, to work. When we work at something like work at a job or work out a math problem or work at building a house, we can be said to be laboring, to be working. So why would we have a day that celebrates work? Wouldn't it be more fun to celebrate fun or vacations or naps or rest time? Why in our country do we celebrate labor? Well, Labor Day isn't as much about work as it is about workers. It's a day to celebrate all the workers of the world, all the people who work at jobs to provide goods or things, and services that we use in our lives. Way back when, there weren't big stores where people could buy everything they needed. There was no Amazon delivery. People grew their own food, made their own clothing, crafted the things they needed, like building their own homes out of logs or making carving bowls out of wood. Everyone worked very hard just to have what they needed. And then people started coming up with machines that could do some of the work for us. Instead of having to spin yarn from sheep's wool to knit a pair of socks, machines were developed that could spin the wool into yarn and could make the socks. Instead of chopping down logs to build houses with, machines were developed to mill logs into lumber. Many things that were done by hand were now done by machines. You sometimes hear the term the Industrial Revolution. Industries, businesses, factories, mills were created to do all this work, and people could then buy the things that were being produced by the machines. And for people to earn money, they might work or labor in these factories and mills. And there were problems, though. One of the things that happened was that the people who owned the factories and mills often didn't take very good care of their workers. Sometimes the jobs were very dangerous. Just imagine like working in a sawmill where you're working around these big saws that are made to cut logs and turn them into lumber. Workers might get hurt or they might get killed while working. Owners expected their workers to work very, very long hours, maybe 12 or even 16 hours every day, and maybe even had them work 6 days or 7 days every week. No days off, ever. No vacations, ever. And they would often pay very little money to the workers, but workers sometimes needed that money, even though it was a little amount, so they'd agree to work, even though it just wasn't very much. They also hired children, sometimes as young as 5 or 6 years old, to work in the factories and the mills. Can you imagine having to go to work every day? It also meant children couldn't go to school. And again, the conditions were often very dangerous and unhealthy for the workers. Well, after a while, workers and people advocating for the workers began to stand up for themselves and demand that they have better and safer working conditions. They began to insist that they be paid a fair amount for the work they were doing, enough so families didn't have to send their children to work. They began to insist that they work fewer hours in a day, fewer days in a week, so they had time and energy for other things and not just working and sleeping. They formed something called unions, and unions are groups of people who band together, who come together to work for safer, healthier, and more fair working conditions. These groups of people would go to the business owners and demand that things change. Often the owners would fight against the unions. They didn't want to make the changes. They would refuse to do what was being asked of them. So the unions would stage protests and demonstrations so that the public learned about their concerns. Sometimes they would say, if you aren't going to make things better, we're going to stop working. And they would go on strike. They would just walk out and stop working. And with no workers, the owners couldn't run their businesses. One famous strike in March was led by a woman named Mary Harris Jones, or as she's known by now, Mother Jones. And she made it her life's work to work for unions to help get better conditions for workers. And in the early 1900s, not, a little over 100 years ago, she led a march called the March of the Mill Children. She gathered up children who worked in the textile mills. Textile mills are places where cloth is made. And they gathered up their parents as well, and they marched from Philadelphia to New York City. They marched about 100 miles, and it took them about 3 weeks to get there. They would stay in the homes of other union folks, and they'd put them up, and then they'd get on the road and they'd walk again the next day. And after they got to New York City, they had a big parade. And then some of them went to the summer home of the then president, Theodore Roosevelt, that was just outside New York City. They wanted to make him aware of their cause. Can you imagine walking 100 miles to fight for justice and fairness? Sometimes the protests and strikes worked to make things better, and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes the protests and strikes got violent and people were killed during these protests. Over time, things started to change. And some of the changes we now have been made into laws. We have laws that require protection for workers, so the risk of getting hurt or killed at work is far less than it used to be. Work schedules are now typically 5 days a week for 8 hours a day. So 40 hours in a week, rather than 6 or 7 days a week for 12 or 16 hours a day, which would be well over 80 hours a week. If people have to work longer than 40 hours, their employers pay them extra for those hours. We have a minimum wage that tells the business owners the lowest amount of money they can pay a worker. And we no longer allow young children to work. And I wish I could report that the fight for fair wages and fair conditions was over. It's not. There are still times when employers are not taking good care of their workers. And there are other countries that don't have the same laws that we have. So there are many places in the world where the conditions in which people work are terribly unsafe, where people still work long, long hours, where children are still used as workers. You know, as Unitarian Universalists, we talk about our principles, and one of our principles is to work for a world where everyone is treated with respect and treated fairly. There's still work to do. There's still work for us to do to make this happen. We can build on the long history of our country of people standing up and insisting on better working conditions for all workers. So tomorrow, Labor Day, take a moment first to think about all the workers who provide us with so much. When you eat your lunch, perhaps a barbecue or a picnic, look down at your plate and think about all the people who helped to put that plate of food in front of you. There are farmers and farm workers who grow the food. There are bakers and food processors who take those ingredients and turn them into things like hamburger buns and macaroni and hamburger or Impossible Burger. There are people who transport the food from the bakeries and factories to your local stores. There are grocery workers who stock the shelves and cashier at the checkout line. And as you get dressed, think about all the workers who work to grow the material, to make the thread, to weave the cloth, to cut it out and sew the clothes, to transport them to our stores and work in the stores. Our lives are touched every day by millions of workers who do this. And we can say thank you and celebrate them on Labor Day. We can also give thanks to the people who have worked hard over the years to make a better life for all the workers. People who risked their lives to fight for justice in the world. People who weren't afraid to speak up because they knew it was important that everyone be treated fairly and with respect, kindness, and compassion. Happy Labor Day, everybody. Enjoy your day. And thank you all the workers and all the organizers over the years who have made better conditions for everybody. That's our time for all ages. As always, I like to speak the words that we often use when we sing kids out of our sanctuary as they head to classes. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. Now is the time when we invite you to generosity, to offer financial gifts for the work of this congregation. Thank you for your consideration to support our church during these unprecedented times that we are a part. You may follow the link on the following slide or click on the link in the chat to text your donation to contribute your support for our church members and for our staff to keep our congregation connected in new and dynamic ways. Every little bit helps, and while we are physically apart, our gifts are stronger together. And now let us together speak our words of dedication of the offering. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Mother Jones, for the union jobs that I enjoy and so many of us do throughout this pandemic, working as an essential worker in the transit union has been a lifeline for me and my brothers and sisters in King County. And on this Labor Day weekend, I've been imagining the possibilities of our labors as one community among many. I found my heart opening, imagining all of the work and service you all involve yourselves in. I am inspired by you, beloveds. I'm inspired because you prove time and time again that when the going gets tough, Tahoma gets going. This community speaks up, we turn out, we answer strong. For instance, imagine all the tasks, all the jobs, all the positions you yourself have held throughout your lifetime, and how even the smallest responsibility, even the smallest collaboration on teams, even the greatest goals and missions that may have felt impossible at the time carried forward some greater good. And also imagine all the writings and communications you have authored with loving rationale in the face of incredible challenges. Think of how your daily communications carry the truths and principles of this community into the light of the larger communities and social networks we dwell in. We have been doing this moral and ethical work for decades with challenges and setbacks and toes stepped upon, yet we continue to labor to keep our loving faith and principled equity moving forward. Some of us, with more years lived than others, may need to mentor younger generations rising up among us in order to transform life's challenges into actions. Others of us are able to change life's challenges into actions on the front lines ourselves, putting the possibilities of equity we've learned from prophets into action, inspiring the spiritual work that being alive calls us to, across the full spectrum of humankind. Reflect on the possibilities that your life work of turning challenges into actions has created possibilities for you. Consider how it's impacted many beings where you have lived and where you do live, as well as beings throughout the earth. You, beloveds, have carried out this work with teachings and preachings of prophets in your heart. You've carried out your contributions to society, having learned from prophets' possibilities when they were faced with similar challenges. Their lived experiences and teachings inspire ours as we strive to live our faith in social change, unapologetically, progressively. Two eras in history have been on my mind this week. One is 1965, when the Watts riots in Los Angeles broke out following the signing of the Voting Rights Act. What followed was nothing less than a social revolution born from Black civil rights struggles, which our culture today still upholds as one of the most potent developmental times when challenges led to possibilities. The other era that's been on my mind, and I think others' minds this week, is 1973, when Roe versus Wade opened hearts and minds and health services to respect women's rights to choose what's best for their bodies and for their lives. And now, over 50 years later, we are challenged once again to defend these rights. We have learned that relying on laws and policies as the primary tools for carrying out social change is not enough. Our hearts are being called to open yet again, thanks to our rising social consciousness that merely relying on policy and enforcement alone does not complete the challenge to improve equity for all. Yes, we have learned, beloveds. We inspire one another with how much we learn, regardless of who we love, regardless of where we live today or where our ancestors lived long ago, regardless of our positions within our society's systems, or our race, or our gender identity, or our orientation. Regardless, we strive to live and learn so the challenges surrounding us on this day can still lead toward possibilities. The Reverend Mark Morrison Reed puts it this way: we are not called to succeed, we are called to try. Responding because we have dreamed of a better, more just tomorrow, we are sustained by love and by hope. We care, therefore we act. In acting, we risk having our hearts broken 1,000 times. That is the price our African-American religious forebears accepted. It is what living fully, deeply, and with integrity requires. We care, therefore we act. Right now in our world, our care is being put into action in halls and streets and city parks and Zoom rooms. Many of us are building an authentic fusion of ethics and morals throughout the entire spectrum of living beings on earth. We heed the wisdom of prophets who show us how to humbly care for the interdependence of each soul's unique identities as we uphold the interdependence of our communities. How to humbly act with the interdependencies of all living beings in our hearts. How to stop oppressive white entitlement so hearts may open and bring to center the lived truths and suffering of all souls. We care, therefore we act. This week, I've also been reflecting about the past few decades and how social media has made the challenges and possibilities of swift social reforms come to pass throughout the world, for better and for worse. The challenges of systemic racism, systemic poverty, systemic climate change now permeate our media posts, threads, and airwaves, and shape the possibilities for change. Many of you have helped amplify equity in your online posts, helped amplify free and independent pursuits of authentic truth through your social media keystrokes. It's positively inspiring when you pause to reflect on it. And humankind's greatest way through all the challenges and possibilities, beloveds, is to continually open our hearts to truth, no matter how fearsome the challenge. To open our souls to interdependent equity for all, and to pass along the truths of every community's lived experience with humility, compassion, and reverence for all living beings. It is practicing the humble, open heart that will sustain our work as a faith community during these times. It is open-hearted compassion that will heal the moral injuries our contemporary lives can cause day by day. Thank heavens, we have prophetic voices from history as well as those living among us today to bolster our practices of compassion, to inform our practices of wholesome humility. And during the challenges of this week, as impossible as recent challenges may seem, the possibilities of our open-hearted faith are being tested every day. The challenge in front of us is this: that liberation, freedom, and equity for all are not won and then done. Freedom and equity are not aspirations or missions or wars to be wrought and written into policies and laws which we delegate to leaders and then blame them for their failures. No, beloveds. Our interdependent, anti-oppressive future will come into view when we can open our hearts to this truth: that liberation, equity, and freedom are lifelong spiritual practices. The possibility of equity and freedom for all is the overall hope, the overall call of our human souls. The possibilities that we shape and derive during life's challenges are made manifest through a continual spiritual practice of humbly opening our hearts as we collaboratively cross borders that divide us, borders of gender, economics, cultures, race, climates, species, orientations, and more. Liberation, equity, and freedom are lifelong spiritual practices, beloveds, grounded in our care and actions for the greater good. The open-hearted spiritual practice of liberation, freedom, and equity requires all of us to continually learn the truths of the suffering in our communities today, so that we may interdependently forge the freedoms of tomorrow. Regardless of the ongoing practice that an open soul requires, regardless where we land on humanity's spectrums of marginalization, regardless of how we each live the love that lives inside of us, I offer you this: we care, therefore we act. We long for open-hearted compassion. We ache for open-hearted liberation and equity. And we carry in our souls the will to put into practice the possibilities every challenge presents to us. May we labor this very day to put those possibilities into practice right here in this beloved community of communities, so that all souls may feel welcome and thrive. Blessed be, and amen. In this moment of peace and quiet, let us set an intention for the week ahead, perhaps grounded in what we have shared together so far this morning. Let us be a church of open hearts. Wherever we gather, however we gather. Let us be a church inspired in love and humility, open in heart and spirit, and connected by possibilities.
Now let us extinguish our chalice with this unison reading. It is in your chat. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Thank you for joining us this morning for our worship service. We are so glad to have you here and for us to all be together. As a reminder, we have 2 opportunities today for social time following this service. There is a group that meets at Wapato Lake Park. They start meeting at about noontime. Wapato Lake Park is the main entrance is off of Sheridan Avenue, which is just a couple blocks west of the church. And it's down, I'm not sure of the exact address, but it's down around 68th or 70th Street. There's an entrance into the park. There's parking there, and you'll see a large play structure, and Sheila Wybrow and others from the congregation will be there. You might want to bring a chair of your own, a folding chair, to join everybody. There's also parking at the south end of the park if there's if the parking lot near the play structure is too full, off of 72nd Street. The other opportunity today is that we will have a Zoom get together for those who can't make it to the park, but still want to gather together. This will be a Zoom meeting. It will begin as we close down this meeting. And so the link to that Zoom is in the chat and you can click on it, but know that if you click on it right now, that room is not yet open. You will get a message that says the host is in another meeting. That's me. So we need to shut down this event and then I will open up the other event. So we will see you shortly, either in Zoom meeting or at Wapato Lake Park. We hope that we'll see some of you. And in the meantime, have a great week.